Number 8. Shaanxi Earthquake. The Shaanxi Earthquake, also known as the Jiaojing Earthquake, struck China's Shaanxi province on January 23, 1556. The earthquake devastated a densely populated area with fragile infrastructure, claiming an estimated 830,000 lives, making it the deadliest earthquake in human history. The region's geography contributed significantly to the destruction. Many residents lived in yaodongs, artificial cave dwellings carved into loess silt cliffs, which were highly unstable during seismic activity. When the earthquake hit, entire villages collapsed as these caves caved in, burying the inhabitants. The tremors also triggered large landslides, further worsening the devastation. The earthquake not only caused immediate loss of life, but also destroyed countless homes and led to widespread economic hardship. The region struggled for years to recover, with many survivors left homeless and impoverished. One of the most terrifying aspects of the disaster was its suddenness. Historical accounts suggest that most of the population was asleep when the earthquake struck in the early morning, leaving no time to react. Entire families were wiped out within seconds, and towns were reduced to rubble. Some survivors reported feeling aftershocks for months afterward, living in constant fear of another disaster. Number 7. Krakatoa Volcano. The 1883, in Indonesia, Krakatoa volcanic eruption stands as one of the most catastrophic volcanic events in human history. On August 26 to 27, 1883, Krakatoa erupted with an explosion equivalent to 200 megatons of TNT, more than 13,000 times the force of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The eruption produced the loudest sound ever recorded, heard over 3,000 miles away. The eruption was caused by tectonic activity along the Sunda Strait, where the Indo-Australian and Eurasian plates collide. The force of the explosion caused 2/3 of the island to collapse, triggering a series of tsunamis with waves reaching heights of over 120 feet. These waves devastated the coastlines of nearby islands, especially Java and Sumatra, where entire towns were obliterated. The human toll was staggering, with around 36,000 people losing their lives, many drowned by the tsunamis, while others were buried under volcanic ash and debris. The eruption ejected vast amounts of ash into the atmosphere, darkening the skies for days. For months, people around the world witnessed vivid red and orange sunsets due to volcanic ash lingering in the atmosphere. Additionally, the eruption caused a global temperature drop of 1.2 degrees Celsius, which led to crop failures and extreme weather conditions worldwide for several years. Number 6. Cyclone Bhola. On November 13, 1970, Cyclone Bhola struck East Pakistan and West Bengal, India, creating widespread devastation. With winds reaching 115 miles per hour, this Category 3 cyclone submerged coastal villages and claimed between 300,000 to 500,000 lives, making it the deadliest tropical cyclone ever recorded. Forming over the Bay of Bengal, the cyclone intensified as it neared land, but tragically, the majority of the coastal population received no early warning. As the cyclone hit land, entire villages were wiped out, homes destroyed, and survivors were left without shelter, food, and clean water. The storm brought flooding-ravaged farmlands, worsening food shortages in the following months. The estimated damage from the cyclone amounted to $86.4 million. Although Cyclone Bhola wasn't the most powerful storm in history, it caused the greatest loss of life due to the lack of disaster preparedness. The East Pakistan government faced significant criticism for its slow response, both in warning citizens and in providing relief post-disaster. Number 5. Indian Ocean Tsunami. The 2004 Indian Ocean Tsunami, also known as the Boxing Day Tsunami, was one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history. On December 26, 2004, a 9.1 magnitude earthquake off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia, triggered a massive tsunami that swept across the Indian Ocean, devastating coastal regions in 14 countries. The death toll was staggering, with an estimated 230,000 to 280,000 lives lost, and the worst-hit countries being Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, and Thailand. The earthquake occurred along the Sunda megathrust, releasing an immense amount of energy and displacing a massive volume of seawater. This created waves that traveled at speeds up to 500 miles per hour. The waves surged to heights of up to 100 feet, inundating towns and villages. The destruction was widespread and overwhelming. Indonesia alone saw more than 170,000 deaths, while over 30,000 were killed in Sri Lanka. In Thailand, the tsunami struck popular tourist destinations, killing thousands of locals and tourists alike. The economic cost was estimated at $10 billion, with homes, businesses, and infrastructure wiped out across the region. Number 4. Yellow River Flood. The 1931 Yellow River Flood occurred between July and November 1931 and is one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history. A combination of extreme weather events caused the Yellow River to overflow, resulting in catastrophic flooding that devastated a large portion of eastern China. Estimates suggest that between 3.7 to 4 million people lost their lives, making it one of the deadliest floods ever recorded. The flooding was triggered by several natural factors. Unusually heavy snowfall during the winter of 1930, followed by torrential spring rains, led to the swelling of the Yellow River, along with other major rivers like the Yangtze and Huai. Additionally, in July alone, China experienced 9 storms, 5 times the annual average. These extreme weather conditions overwhelmed China's flood control systems, which had been neglected for years. In some areas, floodwaters rose to 50 feet, submerging over 88,000 square miles of farmland, villages, and cities. Entire towns were wiped out, and millions of people were displaced. Survivors were left in dire conditions, with many constructing makeshift rafts to float through the floodwaters in search of food and clean water. Others took refuge on rooftops, helplessly waiting for rescue. Number 3. Great Chinese Famine. The Great Chinese Famine, 1959 to 1961, stands as one of the most devastating human-made disasters in modern history. It is estimated that 15 to 45 million people perished due to starvation. The roots of this catastrophic famine are complex, with a key factor being the policies of the Great Leap Forward, initiated by Chairman Mao Zedong. The campaign aimed to rapidly industrialize China's economy, but the collectivization of agriculture and an intense focus on steel production diverted critical resources away from food production. These policies were further compounded by adverse weather conditions, including droughts and floods, exacerbating the already dire food shortages. Reports of cannibalism emerged, where desperate villagers resorted to eating the bodies of deceased loved ones to stay alive. This speaks to the absolute despair and horror experienced by ordinary citizens during the famine. The government's inability to effectively respond to the crisis made the situation even more terrifying. Number 2. Spanish Flu Pandemic. The Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 to 1919 was one of the deadliest global health crises in recorded history. Caused by the H1N1 influenza A virus, its origin remains uncertain, but it spread rapidly due to the movement of troops during World War I. The pandemic infected about 500 million people, roughly 1/3 of the world's population at the time, and resulted in an estimated 25 to 50 million deaths, far surpassing the 15 to 22 million deaths from the war. In the United States, the death toll reached 675,000. With cities like Philadelphia and Boston hit particularly hard. Public health systems were overwhelmed, and morgues struggled to keep up with the escalating death toll. Schools, theaters, and other public spaces were repurposed into temporary medical facilities. At that time, there was no specific vaccine to combat the virus, which spread easily. and many patients developed severe pneumonia, leading to rapid death. The pandemic finally subsided by the summer of 1919, when those infected either passed away or developed immunity against virus. Number 1. The Black Death. The Black Death, which devastated Europe from 1347 to 1351, was the most catastrophic pandemics in human history. It was caused by the Yersinia pestis bacterium, spread primarily by fleas carried by rats, which common everywhere at the time. It was easily transmitted the disease, and once infected, people could pass it to others through airborne droplets. The pandemic spread rapidly by trade routes, ravaging populations across multiple continents. The disease initially manifested as painful swellings, known as buboes, that appeared in the groin or armpits, sometimes as large as an apple or an egg. These swellings oozed blood and pus, followed by a series of other horrific symptoms such as fever, chills, vomiting, diarrhea, terrible aches, and ultimately, death. It is estimated that the Black Death claimed the lives of 75 to 200 million people, wiping out between 30% to 60% of Europe's population. Cities like Florence and London were particularly hard hit, with some losing over half their population. In Paris, approximately 50,000 people died in a short span, while in Venice, bodies piled up in the streets as the authorities struggled to manage the death toll. Widespread fear and superstition followed, with many believing that the plague was a divine punishment. This belief led to the rise of flagellant movements, where people publicly whipped themselves in penance, hoping to atone for humanity's sins and stop the plague. And that's all I have for this video. Thanks, and see you next time.